We're just so eager to get started. And just wanted to again thank you everyone for tuning in. This is such a timely conversation in light of everything that is going on. So thank you to each and every one of you for being here. I just wanted to take the time to welcome everyone to our Imagining Abolition series to kick off the year at DePaul University. This is a three-part series where we will discuss the phenomenon of abolition, present a community definition here today, investigate the context of modern abolition, and learn how to envision and practice this framework. My name is Eva Long, and I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I serve as the coordinator for the Asian Pacific Islander Latin American Cultural Center within the 4 cultural and resource centers in the Office of Multicultural Student Success. In OMSS, we work to improve the retention and graduation rates of students of color, first-generation college students, students who demonstrate financial need, undocumented and immigrant students, and students with marginalized genders and sexualities. I want to also take a second to thank both Jenny and Diego, student programming assistants of the Cultural and Resource Centers, and also lead event organizers tonight of this event. Before we begin, I really want to acknowledge the heaviness in our hearts since learning that Breonna Taylor did not get justice today. Her tragic death, compounded by the violence of silence and inaction by the city that she called home, is more than any one of them should have to endure. Thank you everyone for being here, and justice for Breonna Taylor is abolition. So with that, I will turn it over to Jenny to get us started with community guidelines.
So we just have a few community guidelines so we can help care for each other in this space, especially in this virtual space. We know that it's a little weird right now, so I'll just read through them real quick. So our first community guideline is whiteness is present and pervasive. None of us are above it, beyond, or outside of systems of power and oppression. All systems of oppression stem from whiteness and are interconnected. They are relentless, and so we must be. Experiment, be open to new ideas. Respect confidentiality. That's separate. Suspend assumptions, including gender, race, etc. No one is an empty vessel. Half thoughts are welcome. Acknowledge your dominant identities. Recognize how they impact you and those around you, both in this space and beyond, i.e., check your privilege. Challenge by choice. Decentralize, deconstruct, decolonize. Misgendering is an act of emotional and psychological violence that leads to and is predicated by systematic violence. Misgendering can look like using the wrong pronouns to refer to someone, dead naming someone, using gendered language that someone has stated makes them uncomfortable, and more. Listen actively and use I statements. Comfort versus safety. Recognize the difference between being uncomfortable versus being unsafe. Lean into discomfort to learn. Protect yourself if you feel unsafe. This space is for folks to feel supported in a difficult time. Please avoid language that can be harmful, such as slurs, stereotypes, and cursing that is directed at people. Community care is self-care. Centralized healing. Preface potentially triggering content with content warnings. Check in with yourself to ensure that what you're sharing and how you're responding to people is truthful and kind, and acknowledge that you are on occupied land. So that is our community guidelines for today's event. If anybody would like to add any, you can definitely talk in the chat box. But I think from there we will go into some introductions. So I can go ahead. My name is Jenny Nguyen. I am one of the facilitators for today's event, and I'm the PA for the APITA Cultural Center. Diego, do you want to go?
Yeah, hi everybody, my name is Diego. I'm one of your facilitators for today and also the programming assistant that works closely with the LGBTQI plus resource center. Sorry, I've been a little bit all over the place. We have one panelist that we're having some major Zoom technical problems, so I've been trying to deal with that, but I'm back here now with you. And with that, Jenny, do you want to introduce our first 2 panelists?
Okay, So our first panelist is Linzo. They are from the Black and Brown Sex Workers Fund from here in Chicago. And then would you want to just introduce yourself and say your pronouns? They also live by train, so we'll give them a little leeway.
All right, so I started the Black and Brown Sex Workers Mutual Aid Fund back in June. I'm an exotic dancer, and I'm from Chicago, from the south side of Chicago, very passionate about Chicago. And I'm very glad to be here today to talk to you about all of the topics that the coordinators have decided to prioritize today. So, yes.
Thank you, Linzo. Our next panelist is from Black Rising. Can you hear us?
Yep, I can hear y'all. Sorry, my camera's off.
Go ahead, that's totally fine. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. My name's Naira. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a part of a collective called Black Rising. There's 4 of us, to a lot of people's surprise. There's just 4 of us, but basically 4 friends decided that we wanted to reimagine what organizing and mutual aid work looks like. And I'm from the South Side, very passionate about that too. Shout out Linzo. And yeah, I'm really happy to be here with y'all today.
Cool, thanks. So we also have an artist here today. If you can see in the sketch notes, you can see
Jenny,
his
could I
line
interrupt
art.
you real quick?
Oh yeah.
We actually do have our third panelist, Indigo, who can introduce themselves now.
Hi, I'm Indigo. I use they, them pronouns. I am currently living in Philadelphia doing work with the unhoused encampments that we have set up throughout the city. Today is actually our 100th day of occupation, so it's very exciting. I don't know, like I've just been doing organizing work surrounding, colonized people, Black and brown queer people here in the U.S. Come from like a small town background and moved around a lot. So like organizing in large metropolitan areas that I'm new to, and yeah, I guess that's me.
Great. And Jenny, you can tell us a little bit about our artist that we have.
Yeah, of course. So our artist here today is Isaiah Easter. Do you want to give yourself a little introduction and talk about what you're going to be doing today?
Yeah, hey you all. I'm Isaiah Easter. I attended DePaul for some time. I'm excited to be back here in such an important cause. Um, um, I will be kind of recapping the highlights and the main themes of this kind of community gathering here. So I'll be a good reference to get big ideas down, and it'll generally be a big piece here for us to reference about all these great foundational knowledge about abolition. A little bit more about me. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, and I enjoy uh, studying and learning about Black feminist theory, and I'm very much involved in the learnings about abolition. In my studies and more academic background, I was a Black studies or African and Black diaspora studies minor. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you all for having me here, and I'm excited to draw with you all.
Awesome, thank you.
Great. And now before we really get started, because this is going to be a lot of discussion and questions, not only for the panelists, but also we will be going into breakout rooms later if you want to contribute to that. I want to take a little bit of time to ground us and get us feeling kind of, in our bodies in this moment where it's really, really hard. And I want to name that a very big verdict surrounding the Breonna Taylor murder case was announced today. And I know a lot of folks are going to be going to actions after this, and there's a lot going on in the world. So before we start, I wanted to read out this quote from Saidiya Hartman, and then maybe do a little breathing exercise to just close your eyes if you're comfortable. You can turn your camera off or on, whatever makes you feel most comfortable, and breathe and kind of just reflect and sink into this space. So this quote is from a live show that Saidiya Hartman did. And it's one sentence, and it reads, "Abolition is a synonym for the end of the world." And so I hope that we can sit with that for a moment and take just a deep breath and breathe out again. You can hold your hands to your heart if that feels good. And take a second breath. And you can take one final breath as we wrap up. And make sure you take a moment to just situate yourself and feel where you're sitting and where you're at. And you can come back as slowly as you need to. And again, I know we said this earlier, but feel free to keep your camera on or off, however feels comfortable for you. And if y'all are feeling, here, I would love to hand this off to Jenny to ask our panelists a question.
Yeah, so kind of just to set us up, thank you, Diego, for that meditative exercise. So how today will look is that we'll have a little panel discussion right now, and we'll just hear back from our panels about what their experiences are and how they view abolition, and then we'll go out into breakout groups and then come back to debrief. So our first question for the panelists today is, how did you become an abolitionist, or how did you come to abolition? And this can go in a multitude of ways, and feel free to take as long as you wish to answer.
I can go first. Uh, Wait, I hear a train. Oh, sorry, y'all. Okay. How did you become an abolitionist? I feel like, so I went to 6 different elementary schools all over Chicago. Some were private, public, Montessori, art focused. My mom personally felt like I was never challenged, so she would move me from school to school. But what I gathered from going to so many different types of schools with different demographics that were dominantly Black students or dominantly white students, or focusing on multicultural, whatever initiative within those elementary schools they were aiming for. I noticed that throughout all of those schools, whether the Black school was the school with the higher achieving students or not, or if they had a high achieving Black administration, they still would not see as many resources as the schools that had less achieving students or white students did, in my experience. And I think I was about 12 or 13 when Arnie Duncan was taking more money out of CPS, and I read about it. And current events was a great thing for elementary school teachers to do in Chicago, and just like, or in public schools in general, to make kids sit down and look at a newspaper and cut an article out and talk about it, because you end up reading about everything else. And so, yeah, I was upset that Arnie Duncan was taking money out of public schools, while Wrigley Field was like trying to get money, and they were getting millions at the same time, which like is a constant that has been happening for like 15 years now. But at the time I was only 11, 12, or 13. And yeah, I was upset. So that's how I went downtown and left school and was protesting Arnie Duncan. And I was about 13. And I saw kids from all over, from different types of schools. So that was also really reinforcing that, like, to know that as kids, like other kids know too, no matter what school they went to, they also understood very well and clear that students with Black students do not get as many resources as schools with white students, or high amounts of white people in their neighborhoods.
I can also jump in if that is okay. I think that um, particularly being Black, being trans non-binary, and also being immigrant, I think that I was not afforded the luxury of going going far into my life before I had my first like violent interaction and encounter with the police. I think I was like 8 years old, and like a cop had pulled my dad over for like fucking speeding. This is when I lived in Florida. And the encounter just ended up with like the police officer like slapping my dad in the face, and my dad got put in the back of a cop car, and like he had done nothing wrong, so he was like released. And they're like talking to my mom and asking like, if my dad didn't do anything wrong, then like why did this cop just like punch my dad in the face? And like my mom just didn't know how to explain that to me, because it didn't make sense in her world. It didn't make sense in, in her rationale. I think that was just one step, one piece of the, the path that I'm currently walking now. Like I wouldn't consider myself like I would consider myself like a becoming, or like, in the process of becoming an abolitionist. And I have 6 relatives who are in prison right now. I have countless relatives who are living under, state surveillance, be it house arrest or on, parole and other things. And I was never, like I said, never offered, the opportunity to not be, like, all the schools I went to had police officers. When I was a senior in high school, I had, there was an incident in where one of the Black kids at our school was getting bullied by these white kids. They kept taunting him. He got up and like fought the kid, and the white kid ended up going to class afterwards, and the Black kid was on the ground with a police officer's foot on top of him as he was like about to get handcuffed. And all my principals were like standing around watching this happen. I had 4 principals at my school, so 3 of the principals were present, just standing around. And it was like a class change, so I'm like leaving and I'm walking through the lunchroom, which is where this happened, and I'm seeing like there's like something weird is going on. There's some commotion, there's some police, and when there's police, like I go and I pull out my phone, I do what I gotta do. So I start walking over there, and I guess one of the friends of the kid that was on the floor had also done the same that I was doing, was changing classes, and saw his friend handcuffed on the ground, and started asking what was going on. He was very frustrated, obviously. So his friend's handcuffed on the floor of this, cafeteria that they eat lunch in every day. And the police officer starts screaming at him, telling him to back up or he's getting arrested, and starts reaching for his gun. And I had to like literally like fling my book bag across the lunchroom and like run and like put my body, mind you, I weigh 115 pounds. I was probably even lighter then, and put my body in between this police officer and this kid while all my principals stood around. And like, I definitely think that was, at least in my adult life, because at that, I was 18 at that point. So I think that was really like a signifier that like it doesn't matter, because I went to a really good school actually, even though it had resource officers, but I went to the best funded school in my state, because I was living in Delaware at the time. And it dawned on me, it doesn't matter like the economic background that you come from. It does not matter, the grades that you're getting, because this police officer didn't ask for, any transcripts, or didn't ask for, any behavioral reports when he had this kid handcuffed and on the ground. He didn't ask if he had any medical, issues, like anything, nothing. It was just, that was it. And I was the person that had to put my body in front of it. And I think after that, I learned lessons that it is our responsibility to challenge those who are supposed to be in charge, because they will sit back and let anything happen if it doesn't affect them. So yeah, I think, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And I think there's a lot of elements of what you shared that probably resonate with a lot of people. I know I definitely recall moments like that, you know, being a young person. I wanted to check, Naira, if you wanted to share anything also, or we also have some other questions if you want to take some of the other ones.
For sure, I could real quick answer that question too. When I was in 8th grade, I found out who Sean Bell was. Sean Bell is a Black man who was shot the night before, or technically the morning of his wedding. 5 police officers fired 50 bullets into a car with him and his friends, and he died. And I was probably like 12 years old when I read that, but that was like 6 years after the incident had happened. And I read about it on Tumblr. So I was like, because like I was just getting to social media. My parents were like, you can't have social media till you turn 13. So like, I was just like, kind of getting into that world of like educating myself, and came across that and was like, why have I never heard about this? Like, why didn't they teach us about this? And it really made me angry, but it also made me really hurt. And so when I came to high school, I feel like I've hated the police my whole life. That's how it feels. Like I'm from Beverly, and I went to high school in Mount Greenwood. So I come from like 2 cop neighborhoods, right? All of my neighbors were police officers. All my close friends' parents were police officers. So I had this idea in my mind that was like, you know, there are good cops that are my friends' parents, but like, screw the rest of the cops. And then when I got older, I started realizing like, you cannot be a part of a system that you're trying to change. One of my closest friends whose mom was a cop actually quit her job, resigned, because if you actually like look at where you're standing, you'll realize like you can't change like a system off of just, well, I do my job correctly. That's not how it works. It has to be dismantled. And unfortunately, that dismantling also involves a lot of people losing their jobs. Could have been anything in the world. You decided to be a pig, so I don't feel that bad for you. But like, I'm just realizing that as I got older. And then when I was like 14 or 15, I guess, and I started driving, my mom started being like, cool, you can go to protests, whatever, just be safe. And then I organized my first protest when I was 17. I went to school in Mount Greenwood, same neighborhood that the cop that shot Laquan McDonald was from. Super racist. They had to put a speed camera outside of the school because racist white men would literally just run us over. Someone who was a couple grades older than me got hit by a car, and then they put that speeding camera there. Older white men would drive past and call us all types of N-words and monkeys and all types of stuff, just kids trying to cross the street. So I staged my first protest at the school when I saw a police officer like wrongfully trying to detain one of my friends because he was trying to kick him out of the school. And so that was when I was like, cops out of CPS for real, because there's no reason. We have security guards, and the security guards do their job just fine. If police officers are not able to handle regular people on the street, what makes you think that they're equipped to handle children inside of their school? And emphasis on the children, because a lot of people look at young Black and brown kids and they see this adultness in us. Oh, well, they can speak for themselves. They can act for themselves. They're adults. It's not true. We have to grow up a lot faster than a lot of other people. And for that reason, it's the only way that a cop or anybody could justify a police officer manhandling or like roughhousing a 17-year-old boy in the hallway of his school. So yeah, that's kind of how that started for me. And then actually, interesting enough, I saw one of the police officers of someone I used to be friends with. He's actually still my parents' neighbor. At the very first like huge protest that we did during this like this like series of protests that started during the pandemic, which was like May 30th. And I saw him while we were on the front lines getting our asses kicked. And I like called his name and he looked at me and was like, I get why you're out here, but my pension is going to be really nice. And I'm just like, you can't reform that. You can't. And that's a man that watched me grow up, used to, when I was in grammar school, used to give me rides to school and look me in my eyes moments before like I started getting my ass beat, like moments before I caught a baton to the top of my head by one of his colleagues and was like, I'm not gonna quit my job. My pension is gonna be nice. So yeah, started realizing that stuff at a really young age and has just like been emphasized by watching these people's actions. Yeah.
I'd also like to add that thank you for sharing, Naira, because I'd like to add to that. When I had hit high school, so I went to one of the best public neighborhood schools in Chicago, Kenwood Academy, and some smart motherfucking kids, some very smart children come out of that school because the parents and teachers try their hardest. But during my time at that school, there was a lot of money being funneled out of Chicago public schools intentionally. And there would be cops at our school that would arrest kids while they were in class for something they did while they weren't in school. And I saw it happen so often. Like if they had their Kenwood ID on and they stole something out of a 7-Eleven downtown, they like our principal would call the cops on them. So yeah, wanted to add that. There's a train, but
That's so crazy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Vanessa, and I wanted to share something as well. I'm an international student from Rwanda in East Africa. I first came here when I was 17, and I went to school in Erie, Pennsylvania. So when I first came here, I was 17, and at the time, right now I'm in grad school, by the way, here at DePaul University. So when I first came here, like I had never lived away from home, so I didn't know what it's like to be in America, which was kind of funny sometimes because I was like, how do I get to know how these people live, like, you know? Because I'm only 17 and I'm just like here or whatever. And then when I first traveling from Rwanda to here, it's about like 28 hours, which is a very long time to be on the plane when you're by yourself. When I first came to the transit, we have to go through Amsterdam, which I never had a problem with. However, when I got to like at the airport here, they were like, so the police people came and they're like, are you? And I was like, yes. I'm like, I have my I-20 with me, and they were all like, how can you afford it? Did your parents go to school? I was like, yes, they did. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm able to afford being here. And then I remember when I first got to school, one of the very first things that everybody asked me was like, so how come you speak English? Like, where did you go to school? They asked me like all the wrong questions. And then the other people that I was with who were not my skin color never got asked any questions. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit. As an international student, I stand with everybody who's here. I may not understand any pain or any way you guys feel about being here, but I just wanted to share a little bit about that.
Thank you so much for sharing, Vanessa. Yeah. And we're gonna also give some time pretty soon in breakout rooms for more people to share around some questions that we're bringing. The last question that I just wanted to ask for the panelists was, you know, I think earlier we shared that Saidiya Hartman quote where she defines abolition in her own way, right? As meaning nothing less than the end of the world. And so I wanted to ask, right, for the panelists specifically, and then we can talk about it more in breakout rooms with everybody else. Panelists, what does abolition mean to you, right? Like what are ways, you know, and it doesn't have to be one way, but what are ways that you define it, or what does it mean to you, right?
When I talk to people about what abolition means to me and how we should be interacting with it as a concept, I think it's important that we remember that like abolition is not a set blueprint. Nobody ever sat down and was like, this how we gonna win our freedom. This how we gonna, I wish we did. It would have been great if we had a liberation checklist, but there is none. And I think that it's important for people who interact with these systems and interact, with these institutions to know that this is it's a theory about social change. It's a theory on how we can better take care of each other. It's a theory and a practice of how we can better understand one another and remedy issues that historically have not just been, ignored and neglected, but criminalized, and people have died because of these problems that we as humans don't tangibly have control over. So I think when we talk about abolition, we need to be talking about a politic of progress and revitalizing those who have been left out, revitalizing those who have been marginalized the most, and pulling them up to the forefront of this struggle. A lot of times when we talk about, people who are incarcerated and those doing work who are not incarcerated, there's terms thrown around like the free world and the unfree world, and we have to advocate for access to those who are in the unfree world because they won't let them out. So we need to be knocking on their doors and telling them to let us in. And there are so many different conversations, there are so many different avenues in which we can be instructing each other, or not even instructing each other, but guiding each other into more better informed decisions about policing ourselves, policing our friends and our family, about, upholding institutions that profit off of Black and Indigenous death. There are so many different, avenues in which somebody can start building up a capacity for abolition work.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, that was very beautifully said.
I can go next. So for me, the first thing is that a lot of people hear the word abolition and they get scared. They think that means like a lawless society that's like everybody's just running around doing whatever they want and there's no one to keep criminals accountable or whatever. But in reality, abolition is like freedom from the systems that are designed to oppress us. And that's what people fail to understand, is that we claim, oh, the system is broken. It's like, no, the system's not broken. The system is working exactly the way the system is designed to work, which is why we have to completely dismantle it. I gave an example of a table. Let's say my boyfriend buys a new table for my apartment and the table is a square and it's huge and it won't fit through my door. And I look at the table at the front door and I'm like, this table doesn't match anything in my apartment and it won't fit through the front door. It doesn't matter how many ways you turn the table, it's a square, it's not gonna fit in the front door. And even if we dismantle the table and then bring it into the apartment and rebuild the table, it's still the same table and it doesn't match my apartment. It's the same thing with policing. It doesn't matter how many ways you dice it, policing is designed to oppress minorities and marginalized groups. And even if we were to reimagine or if we were to reform, it still doesn't fit the people who we consider people now, right? Because when we look at the Constitution, Black people were not considered people. Oh yeah, all men are created equal, but Black people were not considered people, so we were not included in that verbiage. So even if you did reimagine it, it's still never going to fit those of us who are demanding that these systems fit us as well. So also abolition is reallocation It's us deciding where our funds go. It's me deciding that you're taking 20% of my check. I should be able to come to school and have air conditioning. I should be able to not have to use a book that my sister used 7 years before me and it's all busted up and tattered. I should be able to get on the bus for free if I'm a CPS student. I should be able to, you know what I mean? Like not have to feel like I'm being surveilled all the time. Like even when I'm just acting normal, I could be criminalized, like things like that. And then also just like, yeah, like being able to feel safe, and being able to feel like your safety is being handled correctly. We call 911 and the police comes, the police doesn't know first aid. We asked the police officer, I was on the side of an accident, almost literally a girl went through a house. I got out of my car. I had more resources to help her than the police did. I'm like, do you need a bottle of water? I had like first aid in my trunk from past protests and stuff like that. And the police officer came, they didn't even have, all they had was a little notepad and a pen, didn't even have a single Band-Aid in his pocket or anything. But when people have like, they call 911 for whatever reason, whether they're having like mental health issues or domestic violence issues, police is not able to help with that. People deserve to be able to get the help that they need. If I'm having a mental health issue, I deserve to be able to have someone who is a social worker or a psychiatrist come to me and not a police officer who's going to make me breathe into a brown paper bag. I deserve to have that help because I pay for that help. My checks go towards that help. People also need to realize that like the neighborhoods that are the safest are not neighborhoods with more police officers. If you take a shot every time you see a cop in Roseland, you'll be drunk in 10 minutes. But in these other, but then there's still, you know, people are still getting shot every other week, or people are still getting killed, or cars are still being broken into. But then you go to these like nicer neighborhoods and you're not really seeing a lot of police officers, but they have like rec centers and clean parks and they're doing street cleaning every other weekend. They have these nice schools. So when you like break down abolition by what we could be doing instead of funding the police, it makes it more tangible. It makes it like look better. And like, honestly, fuck what other people think, but I really try to present it to them in that way so that they don't feel like abolition is just like, oh yeah, let it be like a free for all. But yeah, so that's what that looks like for me.
For abolition framework, for me, I want to see it starts at language. It starts at how people are taught to approach different things and different topics. And like I feel like having grown up as a different bodied person, a darker person, someone who doesn't identify on the gender binary, there's a lot of gaslighting that happens in those first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, like elementary schools, and that culture right there, that boys will be boys, that throwing the F word everywhere, left and right, calling everything gay that is slightly feminine. All of that contributes, like sexualizing young kids, um, heterosexualizing young kids brings so much danger to everyone else's capacity to understand themselves and understand the world around them. And I would often come in contact with classmates where, after having conversations after having conversations that would take a huge emotional toll on me or the other black gay people in the room, or other black kids in the room, it would create such a just a disengagement that you would want to have with the rest of the day. Often those kids would want to drop out of school. Like you are told socially every day that you don't matter because of the society that you're born into, whether you're bigger, whether you are darker, whether you do not operate inside of the gender binary or the sexual binary. There is so much more that has to be done to help yourself find that language. And I feel like those who identify within the binaries that are given to us also deserve better language. And that being widespreadly accessible. I feel like I saw so much. I would see growth in classmates when we had teachers that got to take the time to enrich us and not teach us to a test curriculum. That No Child Left Behind left so many of us behind. And we lost years of language building because of that. So yeah, for me, it has to do with language and respecting when someone says this no longer applies. So, choo choo. Uh, yeah, CTA's outside. Also, can you hear me? Okay, cool. Also, abolition looks like free transportation. Um, Abolition looks like what happened a few years ago when the South and West Side buses stopped running at night and those Uber prices went up at night. That looks like the reverse of the abolition is the complete reverse of that. And yes, there were so many cops were added to trains when they stopped the buses from south to the South and West sides, and all I saw were Black and brown people, namely Black femme identifying bodies and Black gay people going from the Gold Coast and Boys Town and those north side, Lincoln Park, Wicker, Logan, all of these north side neighborhoods to then go back out to Oak Park, the west suburbs, the west side, the south side, 127th, off the farthest, the 95th red line, to serve these communities and see no reinvestment back into them. Something that I said yesterday to a friend is how I feel about abolition, which is my ancestors' blood is in those bank accounts. I will not be repeating myself with the same things they said and felt.
If I could add one thing, I think something that you said that is really interesting about how all these Black people, all these Black bodies were literally going out of their way, going out of their comfort zone, out of their neighborhoods to go serve white people, to go serve white communities, to go serve their interests. And then there's obviously no investment. And I want to just bring that back to, because I feel a lot of the conversation around abolition is about protecting Black and brown youth, because we're so much more susceptible to state violence. And I just think about in our schools where it is usually Black queer kids who are doing the real groundwork to actually be educating their classmates and their peers on, social justice issues and on, fucking pronoun usage and on, slurs, this, that, and the fourth. And we're doing the heavy lifting, doing the heavy work, all the while being called the crazy Black girl in the room, loud and angry, you're crazy. I used to get commie, you're a communist, like everything under the sun, which period I am. But then we graduate from high school, right? And I literally witnessed this because I graduated from high school just recently, like 2 years ago. And this year, when all the protests started, sprouting around George Floyd's death back in late May, early June, I was seeing a whole lot of kids who would stare me down in the hallways, who would have this, that, and the fourth to say about me, calling me crazy, calling me out my name, all types of N-words and slurs, but all of a sudden wanted to pop out because now that, a movement for Black life and for Black liberation has been co-opted by those who can make a pretty little Black Lives Matter sign and say that this is what their abolition work looks like, and that they can, garner the accolades and they can get all the roses and all the applause, when I literally was seeing kids that I went to high school with regurgitating my exact same talking points that I was like screaming at them, like almost in tears, like 2 years earlier. And now they're on the bullhorn. These white kids are on the bullhorn talking about my friends, my classmates. And I'm just wondering, because I wasn't your friend and your classmate when you had to actually interact with me on a day-to-day basis. But I think like in so many different, and we see this in so many different ways. We see this in the way in which, you know, our government neglected our healthcare workers and our essential, you know, service workers, most of which who are Black and brown, and many of which come from immigrant and low income backgrounds. And we were just tossed aside to the wayside, even after generations, quite literally generations. 500 plus years of service, and no repayment, no reparation, none of that. So I don't know, I just think it's an interesting way in which, like, these exact same dynamics will play out regardless of where you're at, or if you're in school, if you're in, you know, the job center, if you're in the Black market, wherever you are at. It's always expected that, you know, Black and brown bodies, Black and brown trans and queer bodies have to do the heavy work, have to do the lifting, but then don't reap any rewards ever.
Yeah, can I?
Go ahead.
Because y'all are just like literally just spitting facts right now. It's making me some shoot up inside of me, bro. Because yes to the whole idea of them same white kids being the ones who are out here like, oh my gosh, Black Lives Matter. It's like, you were excusing those racist cops at the school before. I didn't forget you. Abolition also looks like people having access to spaces like this, having access to schools. Like DePaul, I go to Columbia. A lot of times I'm the only Black girl in my classes. Anytime we get to the end of the semester, does anybody have anything to say? I write all my final papers on the fact that I'm the only Black girl or one of few Black kids in the class. And the fact that they don't have access to this classroom and they don't have access to these resources is the reason why I'm out here and I'm missing class to go to protests or whatever the case is. And abolition also looks like us organizers have to start GoFundMe's. I have a GoFundMe up trying to get furniture for my new apartment because this work is not paid. And the fact that, like, our society does not prioritize the people who are getting us free. Our society does not prioritize the people who are the reason why, you know, like, we are able to even have the luxuries we have right now. It always seems like it's protesters against the world. That's not true, because, like, wouldn't be a world if it weren't for people like us being like, hey, slavery is like weird. Don't do that anymore. Motherfuckers are like, abolish slavery. And now they're like, abolish the police. I'm like, this is the same lyrics to a different beat. But yeah, and I'm definitely gonna drop that link. Anyway, that's all.
Yeah, everybody, like, panelists, or even if, you know, you're coming to the space, feel free to drop like anything you're working on, or, you know, the links that you got to drop, especially if you got, I know at least one of our panelists has to head out early, which actually this is a great moment because we're transitioning to breakout rooms. So we have some questions for the rest of the group to get to also talk and talk about what you're thinking about, right? So here, give me a second. Jenny, could you drop those questions? Great. So our questions are, what could your world look like, or the world look like, if the institutions where we see harm were abolished? So some examples maybe could be like prisons, police, but also looking at our healthcare institutions, our schools, neighborhoods. How does it play out, you know, wherever you're at? And the second question and the third question are, how do we get from this world that we're in now to that world, right? That abolitionist world. How could we make things work without those institutions, or with, I think someone had a really good quote earlier about abolition being, you know, doing away with the systems that harm us. So what would it look like without those systems, or with those things abolished? So I'm dropping that in the chat for y'all to look at, and we're gonna go into breakout rooms for a little bit.
Okay, great. Is everybody back? I think so. Okay, awesome. So then we're just gonna kind of get into a little debrief. Here, let me put some questions in the chat. But yeah, we just want to kind of hear back if people want to talk about what they talked about in their groups. Okay, I'll drop it right now. What were some highlights from your breakout room conversations? And how has your thinking and understanding of abolition been challenged by your other breakout group members and by the panelists? Does anybody from some of the breakout rooms want to speak back?
I think for me, in the breakout room, something that I really admired was the questions, and I was just like mentioning how one of the first steps to make things better is the fact that we're here today. The fact that we're having a conversation, the fact that we're able to talk about things that I may not relate to, you may not relate to me, the fact that it doesn't matter how we look, it doesn't matter how my skin color. And I was just like saying that it's so beautiful that we all have a seat at the table to talk about everything that is happening, the fact that I'm able to, you guys can relate to me in some ways or not relate to me. And it's just beautiful, the communications and talking about whatever that is uncomfortable, but that is needed to be said. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Vanessa. Does anybody else from one of the other groups want to speak to that?
We talked about how policing and how how policing is more than just like actual police officers. We talked about that's like doctors, and Diego even touched on like if you're at the grocery store and you can't afford your food, the cashier is a cop because like they're gonna take your food from you if you can't pay for it. And if you decide that you're gonna take the food that you need, there is a cop waiting at the door for you to, or whatever. And that cashier is not gonna hesitate to utilize that resource and get your ass locked up. So yeah, just like the other institutions that are facets of this greater system that we might not even realize. We even talked about like healthcare. I was talking about how like I get off my parents' insurance when I'm 25, and I'm like, I need to have kids before I turn 25 because having babies is expensive and I might not have insurance, like stuff like that. Just like how it controls so many facets of our life that we don't even realize, and they're all a part of this same moving monster.
In breakout room 3, we talked about some of the things we had already touched on, which was education, public education, enriching public education as a means to be a weapon towards abolition, and also one of the people from my group was very inspiring, talking about immigration laws as well. And coming with the abolishment of police also is ICE, and there are attacks being done, and fears that immigrants hold that I do not. We have similar fears, but those experiences are not mine, and it's always I'm always very humbled and willing to continue to listen when immigrants do share, because it constantly reminds me that they are also in this battle with us and in this fight with us. So yeah, we talked about that. And also one specific thing that we would like to see abolished would be Pornhub, because if Pornhub were the free, harmful resource that has taught so many people like negative things about sex, if that were abolished and like forcibly taken down, the education of around sex, the language around sex would change, and so would could change, and so could the market for independent sex workers?
In our breakout room, we had a really good conversation about indigenous struggles for land and giving land back, giving land back to the original proprietors of it, and how we need to be consistently reminding ourselves of the requests that our indigenous brothers and sisters and family members and siblings that they give to us, and what they demand of us, and we need to be heeding to those demands. I think earlier in the, I don't know if that was this week, I believe it was this week, but Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and everybody was real sad or whatnot, and I just had to remind myself, because at first I was like, oh, that's awful, like blah blah blah, like Donald Trump's going to be able to nominate, appoint another, blah blah blah, and I had to stop and back and be like, like that's not, because my indigenous family has been telling me to completely reject the system altogether, in its entirety, and that's abolition work. So
Yeah, thank you all so much. We have like 2 things left on our agenda before we close out. One is, I think we're gonna do like a little closing exercise, but before that, I just want to let y'all know that this is the beginning of a series, and that series in itself is the beginning of a much larger process that's going to be going on here at OMSS, at DePaul, in our office at the Cultural and Resource Centers. So that's the Black Cultural Center, the APIDA Cultural Center, that's Asian Pacific Islander, Desi American, and finally the Latin American Cultural Center and the LGBTQIA+ Resource Center. We're dedicating this year to doing programming around abolition. So this is just like the very tip of the iceberg of how we're going to be delving into it. And next week we have 2 more events. One which is kind of a history called Imagining Abolition, from Slave Revolts to Prison Abolition. And so Amira, who's here on the call with us, is going to be taking that one and helping us do a history around that. And then after that, we'll be doing an event called Transformative and Restorative Justice, a Toolbox. And Georgina, who's here in the call, is going to be working on that. And we're going to be talking about what really robust systems of justice can look like. And so if someone here, I'm going to drop those in the chat. If y'all want to look into that, and the link is just tinyurl.com/DPU abolition 2 and 3. So this was 1, so it'll be 2 and 3. And I want to thank again all our panelists for their time. You have been absolutely incredible. And so we're going to do a closing exercise that Jenny will lead, and then we're going to unveil in a little bit, in a few minutes, the what Isaiah has been working on.
Yes, definitely. And before the closing, I actually want to give space for the panelists to boost anything else that they want to boost. Is there anything else anybody wants to boost? Like GoFundMe's or organizations or anything?
We at the Philadelphia, well, okay, so I didn't really give a good explanation as to like the work that I'm doing in the beginning, but basically this summer, if anyone does not know, Philadelphia has like Philly's unhoused residents came together and started an occupation at 22nd and Ben Franklin. It was like it was a combination of, a Black Lives Matter protest, but it was also centering Philly's housing stock. So Philadelphia has over 400,000 vacant and viable homes that people could be living in, but we have one of the highest percentages of unsheltered people in the United States after like San Francisco and LA. But so we've staged a 100-day occupation to basically pressure the city into transferring those houses into a community rent trust, a community block trust, and also sanctioning other encampments and ending homelessness sweeps and things like that. So we've had several eviction scares. We've had the city come out on several times, police come out, try and shut us down, and we've had a great response from our community, and having, we now have barricades around all 3 of our encampments right now. We've re-entered back into negotiations of transferring a small number of houses, but it is a start. And currently, like, we're just asking that people continue to uplift our demands and uplift our struggle. The thing about this occupation is, like, we're camping out because we have nowhere else to go. I was kicked out of my dorms back in May, and I just recently was able to transition into housing. But I was out there living there, protesting for 4 months in the heat, and the goal isn't, for us to continue to be here. So every time the city comes and tries to sweep us and they're like, y'all gotta go, we're like, all right, well, where are we gonna go? Because we don't have any houses, because y'all won't let us live in these houses. And we've taken independent steps to start housing people on our own, since the city won't. But it's just really important that people on all sides of the country, all fucking corners of the globe, people in all atmospheres, in all circles, be that academic or I don't know, the art world, anything you're in, to be drawing attention, not just to what's going on here in Philadelphia, but to, the struggle and the plight of unhoused people everywhere. I think that also is key to abolition, and abolition work is making sure that everybody's taken care of, and that's shelter, like, at its most basic. I have a theory about, like, how the revolution works, and we take the streets, we take the housing, and then we take the means to production, and the empire is ours. So even if you can't open up your purse, which I would love if you could, and I would definitely be sending, our Venmo and our GoFundMe and everything there. But, just supporting the unhoused people around you, organizing poor people, organizing poor folks around. And, we have amazing work being done by the Philadelphia Tenant Union with rent strikes, and we shut down the courthouse a couple weeks ago. We all got arrested, but we shut that courthouse down for the whole day, and nobody was able to get evicted that day. So just, like, continuing to do work like this, because I saw, like, affordable housing. The thing is, affordable housing in Philadelphia is no longer a reality. What we're pushing for is low and no income housing. There are people who cannot work. There are people who are barred from, any other markets that aren't the Black market. So, we need to be housing everyone. So that's my spiel.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, no, go ahead.
So I'll do closing remarks. As it pertains to the Black and Brown Sex Worker Mutual Aid Fund for the Chicagoland area, so y'all, sex workers have no rights. And what is so dangerous about that is most sex workers that are full service sex workers are Black people, are trans people, and are disabled people. And that puts them at even more of a risk than other career paths, because this is an illegal career path. So there's no ability to file for healthcare under the sex trade. There's no ability to file for housing under that. In fact, housing can be taken away from you. If sex workers are gathering on a Zoom call, they can call it sex trafficking. If sex workers are, when we did a march, we started the stripper strike, which is an initiative that Dakari Robinson has started, who is an exotic dancer as well, to demand equal rights and labor laws for exotic dancers inside of strip clubs. And when we marched, our biggest fear was and that's the white man with that train y'all gotta pay for to use. But no, yeah. So when we gathered, our biggest fear was CPD arresting us for being in this labor class. And we like didn't want people to come nude because that's what happened in Philadelphia. We learned from the protests that we saw in Philly, DC, and LA, and also legalization of sex work is not what we need. It's not what we want. Decriminalization, 1000%. And it helps everyone overall. If you would like to learn more, you can follow my Instagram, which I'm about to put in there, and the specific mutual aid Instagram that I have created, which is Chicago's for Sex Work. Currently, like what happens with fundraising, especially in these mutual aid efforts, is that that money effort stops. White people stop donating to all of these mutual aid networks, and everyone is figuring out what long-term fundraising looks like and what long-term mutual aid looks like. It's not just money in a bank account. It is actual resources. And something that the person who tattooed me, something that they inspired in me recently was the language of gift economy, giving something to someone that they need in exchange for something that you can give them, and or that they can give you. And I'm constantly thinking about that type of economy, because I don't know, when I was a kid, I did ask my parents, like, why do we have to have money? Their answer was, well, if we don't have money as currency, then what is that replaced currency? So I'd like to leave that with y'all today in terms of like what you're thinking about going forward from this conversation.
Thank you so much, Linzo. And yeah, we're hoping to continue, supporting through our series on abolition, all angles, including decrim work, which is super, super important. And Jenny, I don't know if you want to close this out.
Wait, did you want to say something? There's one more panelist to speak, or do you want to? Yeah,
Me?
go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, our lovely other panelists really dropped a lot of gems. I guess I'll just say, like, if you're at a place of privilege, even if that privilege is not presented to you through your identities as like, whatever, like basically what I'm saying is, like, for me, a privilege for me is having come from a nice neighborhood, right? My parents have a good enough credit score for me to be able to take out student loans. That is a privilege. Even though I'm a Black woman, even though I come from immigrant parents, even though, like so many facets of my identity are included in me being a disenfranchised person, we still have to be aware of our micro privileges. And that being said, when you see people's GoFundMe's or you see people doing mutual aid work or whatever, and you're gonna spend $5 on coffee later on the week, match that $5 and throw it in somebody's GoFundMe. If you have the ability to match that $5 and throw it to somebody's mutual aid or whatever, because like it's easy to get lost in the shuffle of how you identify and how you've been disenfranchised. But if you have a point of privilege, you need to flex that privilege and flex that advantage that you have for people who do not have the same advantages. So yeah, just being careful about that. But yeah, I love y'all. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. Okay, now, so we'll transition to a closing. I'm sorry, we run a little bit past time. There's just so much to talk about. So we're gonna end with a one-word feeling. So if everybody wants to type in the chat, just one word of how you're feeling exiting this workshop right now, and I'll put it in here. And then we're gonna show Isaiah's work in progress for the art piece that we have. But yeah, go ahead, and thank you so much for everyone that came out today. Yeah, wow. This is awesome. Yeah, thank you so much to everybody that came out. Feel free to take your time and leave as you want. We will definitely post these graphics and everybody's links online after this. And the video can be found on OMSS's Facebook and the Instagram. So be on the lookout. Yeah, thank you for everybody for coming out. Thank you, our panelists. Have a great night, everybody.
Bye, thank you.